my purpose is to prepare people and organizations for tomorrow. That's as simple as it gets. And wrapped up in that tomorrow word is everything we've just talked about, is that uncertainty. Tomorrow is always uncertain. And when things start changing fast, it becomes even more so. To bring it back to our brain just one last time, we don't actually react to things straight in front of us. We react to situations which we're anticipating. So we're actually anticipating tomorrow and physiologically reacting to that.
What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today, because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others.
In case you missed it,
bring up Holi. So that is the festival of colors in India. I don't know if you've heard about it. So it is a festival where people splash colors on each other. And yeah, it's really fun.
Available everywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero, and he is definitely unique. Our guest is a multi-passionate, neurodivergent researcher, author, futurist, behavioral scientist, and macro strategist. That's a lot of titles. He's one of those individuals that has the rare ability to capture and hold your attention when you're in his presence. He has had audiences captivated and eating out of the palm of his hand from stage. That's a rare trait indeed. He's someone who wants you to understand what the heck's going on and why we should be optimistic about our future. And he's someone that can prepare you for the uncertainty of tomorrow. We all need some of that for sure. He can both peel back the uncertainty surrounding global change and help you look at frameworks to better see and understand change. And we need more people like that in this world, because there's a lot of change coming. He's insightful, inspiring, and thought-provoking, and his stories really make you sit up and think. So please welcome the utterly fascinating uncertainty scientist, Chris Marshall. Chris, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. I hope I live up to it.
I'm sure you will, because all of those are taken from your bio and information about you. So, when people have said about you. So it's your story. I just read it in the intro.
No, thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. It would be nice to be there, in North Wales, be there on the coast doing this live, but maybe some other time. For me, I'm stuck here in Houston. So
next time come here. Yeah, we'll record it. Yeah, somewhere overlooking the sea and the mountains.
Oh gosh, that would be beautiful. Next time. I've only done a couple live shows, with the guests here at a couple events that I've been to, but I would love to do more. And that would be incredible to be in those type of settings for each show. Like yours would be amazing. Yours sounds great. Yeah. Maybe next time. So we see you, Chris, as someone who spreads positive change in the world, because your actions have a positive effect on humanity, positive impact. You're someone that we call a social impact hero. And by our definition, it's an acronym, which we'll get to throughout our conversation. But the first question I have for you, which I ask all my guests, as I bring them on as a social impact hero, is, do you consider yourself a hero?
No, I don't think so. I was thinking as you were reading that, I was like, wow, this is quite an honor to be given that title. I hope my work resonates. I think my work is important, very important for the coming kind of couple of decades, maybe longer. But do I think I'm a hero? No, I'm just somebody that's insanely curious about what's going on and trying to give people some tools to cope with what's coming, or at least what I think is coming. And, as you kind of read out in that introduction, part of the title of my book, that yes, the main title is called Decoding Change, but the subtitle is, what the heck's going on and why we should be optimistic about the future. And optimism about the future is core to this. I'm sure we'll dig into that. But no, I don't consider myself a hero. It's very nice of you to call me one. I just hope my work resonates with people and helps them.
Yeah. And so A lot of people, and you're not alone in not calling yourself a hero. So I'd say probably 75% of the guests that I have on the show, they answer that question as no, that they don't consider themselves a hero. And then pretty much everyone I have convinced by the time I'm done, because the definition that we use is it's not a comic book sense of the word hero. It's someone who is impacting others in a positive way. So I feel, and I didn't always feel this way, Chris, but I've come to realize that we all have the opportunity to be heroic on a daily basis by impacting others and thinking about the greater good, if you will, as you are, right, with your book and your work. So every hero does have their origin story of how they got on the path of doing, what they're doing. So how did you get interested in change, and how did you get interested in everything that you're working on?
That's a big question. I think for me, I can't divorce this kind of origin story from two things. One is that I'm neurodivergent. I'm autistic. And bizarrely, there are always these sayings that your weaknesses can become your strengths. Mm-hmm. And this is certainly true in my sense, in that as an autistic person, certainly as an autistic kid, you can very easily feel outside, isolated perhaps. The world doesn't quite make sense, at least other humans, the mannerisms and what they do doesn't quite make sense. And that basically just sparked off. I needed to find out more. I needed to figure this out. And I think it really started there. I was also very fortunate. As a kid, I was on the British children's ski team, got to travel the world. And I had this chance encounter actually in your beautiful country, up in Killington, up in Vermont, in the Green Mountains. And I went out there, and there's an academy out there, which is just like the utopia for kids, which is skiing and schoolwork. Okay, maybe not quite utopic with the schoolwork bit, but as good as you can get. Sure. And it was there I met this performance psychologist, and I tell this story all the time. And his name was Dr. Jim Taylor. I was 13, 14 years old. And up until this point, I had never considered the mental game. And I can remember the statement. He just basically stood in front of a group of us and said, in ski racing and everything in life, there is both the physical game and the mental game. And it was really that made me think very differently about the world and how I approach it. So I kind of had this autistic trait of not quite understanding, being on the kind of the outside lane of what's going on. And then I had this kind of this secondary force of, okay, if you really want to progress in anything, you've got to nail both the physical and mental, or in business, we could call the technical and mental. And that was really the start. And that was, oh gosh, I don't want to admit it, but maybe 20, 25 years ago, something like that. And I've kind of been curious about this the whole time. Where it then took on another level is I got into finance after my kind of skiing stopped. And that was really, I had no idea at the time, but I joined one of the big global banks. And this was 2007. I mean, the world was euphoric. Investments were flying through the ceiling, and trees. Big money time. Yeah, trees grew to the sky and all that believing. And I kind of, by 2008, obviously my working environment had changed somewhat, and a lot of the economic models that I was looking at and things just didn't bear any resemblance to what was really going on. And this was another moment where I kind of was used to it as a kid, going, okay, well, my model doesn't work in the world, I need to find another one. And here was the secondary kind of stimulus going, okay, well, the models everyone else is using doesn't actually fit the world. So how do we get better at thinking about this? Because, I don't know how much you know about economics. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into it. It's a very dry, boring subject. But a lot of economics is very elegant formulas and kind of theory. Much of it, certainly the kind of traditional stuff, took out human emotions, took out all of this kind of stuff, because that's really hard to model. So if you can just take it out, then it makes it really easy. But unfortunately, it makes it just fanciful. And this is kind of where things changed. So over the past, since that period, the past 14, 15 years now, That's really where my focus has been and where it originated, is in investment markets, trying to understand how the world's changing. Now I'm honored to have the title of head of global investment strategy for a small boutique firm. Understanding how the world is changing is massively important. But I've never left behind that psychological influence. And I don't believe you can really understand global change unless you bring it back to our psychology, our neurology even. And I come at that from a few different angles. I mean, I call, my master's, my postgrad is in behavioral science. But, since then, I think we put too many silos up, and we need to consider so many different things to really understand what's going on. So that's kind of where it's all come from.
Yeah, quite interesting, Chris. And I want to dive into a couple of things about what you said. So it seems to me, in hearing you explain that, is that your original pursuit was, and correct me if this is, let me know if this is correct. Your original pursuit was more to find out in how you fit into the bigger picture. And then it evolved to figure out not only where you fit in, but how do we all fit into the bigger picture? And how does the picture fit into where we are, I guess.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
You've got that spot on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about those as each part. Okay. So when you started with how you fit in, is that something that, let's say as a young boy, right? Is that something that drove you to skiing? Because skiing was because skiing is interesting. Growing up in California, I used to ski a lot when I was a teenager, and then when I was a young man, I skied quite a bit. Now I haven't skied in years. Now that we live in Texas, there's not a lot of mountains around, but where I live. But I loved it, and a few things that I loved about it were I loved the piece of just you and the mountain and the air and the wind and your face and the speed, and those are things that I loved in the nature, right? And kind of connecting with all that really gave me a lot of peace. And the world was a different time then. It wasn't as loud and disruptive as it is today. So what did skiing provide for you? How did you get attracted to that?
I think probably my interest grew because of the things we're talking about. My initial interest, it was just a summer camp here in North Wales. And my parents were kind of like, okay, well, you need to go do something in the summer holidays. Down the road is this outdoor center, and I think you picked like 3 activities, and I picked skiing, canoeing, and climbing or something. And I just took to it. And I was lucky enough that here in North Wales, of all places, we had this incredible ski club with other coaches on it who had been, kind of international racers themselves and everything else. So that's how I got into it. But I think certainly my interest did peak. And actually listening to you say that, I've thought about this in a different way for the first time too, in that as a, kind of autistic or neurodivergent people as a population, I don't want to be too broad brush here, but we do like to withdraw. We like to retreat into ourselves. It's basically a coping mechanism. That we tend to be a little bit more kind of hyper vigilant. We take in a bit more information, but that's completely overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of come back to these periods where it is good just to kind of be alone and come back. And I think you're absolutely right. Kind of I got something out of skiing, which I wouldn't have necessarily got out of a team sport. And there is a certain amount of time in skiing where you're free, and you're, that you're in nature. It's a very calming, soothing place. Even if you are an athlete, you might ski for a minute down a hill, but then you get 6 minutes to sit on a chairlift. So, you do get an awful lot of rest. And I think that was probably good for me. I think the other thing it did was very much, it gave me something which I was really good at. And in hindsight, that was really important because I wasn't necessarily all that good at normal things. And if I didn't have skiing, I think that my self-confidence would have been dented quite considerably. I'm certainly not I'm on the high functioning end of the autistic spectrum, and I don't want to kind of claim I had a really difficult childhood. I just didn't quite fit in. But I think skiing was that thing that I could kind of, people recognized it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you're really good at this. You might not be amazing at all these other things, but you're good at that. And I think that was significant.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Chris. So being good at something and being part of a team, did that allow you to feel like you fit in more and to open up to build relationships?
I think
and
it just gives you something to offer. I mean, let's bring this back to kind of socialization as humans and co-regulation, how we co-regulate and how we fit in, and how important social groups and things are to humans. Mm-hmm. It gives you, I think, any talent you have, any interest you have, I've even extend this to, allows you to participate, allows you to share something, allows you to communicate. And I think that's really where it, kind of what I'm kind of trying to get to here, is that ability. It's not necessarily that I was good at it. It was just that it was something I was passionate about and I was interested in it. And then therefore I could share and show that passion for something with somebody else.
I think what you touched on is really important. There is about, we're a social tribe species. We don't do well alone. No one does, right? It doesn't matter who you are or, if you're autistic or not, no one. And we saw that in the pandemic times, how, people suffered by being alone. And so anything to bring us together in that manner, I see as beneficial, without the tribalism of, people on different sides of the fence or all that nonsense, that comes into it in bigger aspects, but just the sheer support nature of it, right? The camaraderie of it, the support system, those type of things. So yeah, that's all very fascinating for me. I've studied behavior for 30 years as well. And so it is something that I think not enough people think of, and not enough people have a good understanding of it, because people get so focused in the day-to-day and in today's world where you're just sitting there with your face in a screen and everything, and you're head down and you're not interacting. And you see it a lot in, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, that they have underdeveloped social skills that they're in many ways, they don't know how to carry a normal face-to-face conversation because they're used to just face-to-screen conversation. And so I guess that what I'm saying is that if more people can realize that they can get such benefits from the socialization, these different activities, as you were saying, ways to connect, then, that's a beautiful place for people to support one another, right? To support one another in that impactful way. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, for me, this is now where this kind of topic now crosses with my current work. So to kind of just paint the background to what I'm about to say is all that work that I did looking at how the world's changing and everything else. Basically, the research that went into the book Decoding Change really looks at trends and megatrends. I was trying to find something which was fairly stable. In that it's too easy in this modern world to get thrown around by noise and chaos on the surface. If you think of this like an ocean, okay, you have these massively strong, powerful currents underneath. Doesn't really matter what is doing on the surface. It could be a storm. Those currents basically carry on. And the trends and megatrends around us in the world are like that. So we're talking massively kind of slow moving, but impactful things. And this could be anything from demographics to global order change to the natural environment. And really what came out from that work and that research that I try and paint a little bit in Decoding Change is we are living at this pivotal moment of human change. I'm going to sound very dramatic here, but it's not an over dramatization, I promise you. I would say that this isn't just the next industrial revolution as so often banded around. Yes, AI and machine learning and robotics are right there. But I would say this is going to be as big a change as when we stopped being hunter-gatherers and we became the settled agrarian society. And one of the reasons is that we have these trends and megatrends. We have the biggest ones: the natural environment, social philosophy, regulation, infrastructure, all changing at once. This is not just changing business and product, which we've been so used to in the past. And that kind of then brings us back down to, kind of how do we cope? Because that's where it becomes fascinating for me, is we really do have some hurdles up ahead as a human race. I'm not going to deny that. And I have to be careful whenever I say I'm optimistic about the future, because too many people take that as, oh, Chris just denies that we've got any problems. We have some real problems. But when you look back through history, there's this thing that stands out. And the thing that stands out is that as humans, we are the most adaptable, creative, innovative creatures going. I mean, stunningly so. There are too many occasions through history where we should not have walked away. Yet we adapted, we overcame, we created, we innovated. What's really interesting is when we start talking about states that we need to be in to be that version of us. Because within all of us, we have different people. And I'm going to relate this to stress. I'm not talking about bipolar. I'm just saying that we react and behave differently when we're in a calm, joyous state than when we're in a stressed out state.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so what's really interesting is we tend to talk about stress in terms of I'm either stressed or I'm calm. It's either on or off. If I'm not stressed out, I'm okay. And nothing could be further from the truth. This is a scale. For us to actually come together, let's talk about this kind of social side. For us to come together and be empathetic, to be open-minded, to be curious, we can't be stressed. Those things are actually related to calm states. And as uncertainty kind of builds, as the world becomes more frantic, more chaotic, as I'm suggesting it will, there's a very real risk here that we become more fractious, we become more separate, more isolated, because we simply cannot cope with seeing other people's perspectives. We cannot cope with other views. We cannot cope with, kind of all these things. And we lose the single greatest skill of being human, coming back to that adaptability, creativity, and innovation. So to bring it all the way back around, social groups are so important because they help us regulate ourselves. If you shut yourself away when you're stressed, you can be your worst enemy. I mean, most people will have a time where they've done this, and you just go round and round. You just ruminate. That's your brain trying to make sense of what's going on, and it can't. And you often see this in trauma-informed kind of psychotherapy pathways. For somebody to recover from trauma, one of the things they have to do, or one of the things which is often associated, is they have to make sense of things. And to make sense of things, we have to be with others. That's kind of where others come in.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was following along in everything you were saying. I mean, before you said it, I was thinking adaptability. And then also before you said it, I was thinking about that resistance to change that people have kind of inherently, because that goes back to our evolution and, we're a tribe and we're safe and we're worried about everything else. And then these outsiders come in and even if they're nice and they introduce, something good that can help us evolve, but that resistance to change is always there. Right. And you see it just throughout history. And I can see what you're saying about that, things getting worse and with that uncertainty and people getting more resistant and the stress leading them to not be open to grow and to not use that wonderful skill that we have of adaptability. And my hope is that with enough awareness of that stress and enough awareness of the challenges that were going on, not in a negative way, but in simply an awareness way. So, for example, when there became a much bigger awareness after the pandemic of mental health issues and the prevalence of mental health issues with across different generations, and seeing increasing in different sub pockets of mankind, and with that awareness became access to resources, became new resources, became a more of an openness to discussing these things and everything. And so I think that's where some of the younger generations, compared to mine or yours, that's where they have a leg up that I'm expecting that they will be able to, it'll just be new ways that they adapt. So, you know, it may not be the ways that we've adapted in the past, but it'll be new ways that they adapt. Therefore, allowing humanity to move forward with change and to not, you know, get trapped in that uncertainty and, you know, not limit themselves. And that's how I see it. Hopefully, you know, that comes into play, you know, in the next decade. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of, again, coming back to the trends and mega trends, you know, one of the interesting things to do here is to actually talk about cultural philosophy. It sounds big and scary topic, but it's not. It's just kind of what are the cultural norms and what are the beliefs and things that we run with. And one of the things I kind of see changing, so let's pull this back to history. Whenever we see a rapidly changing cultural philosophy, those are the biggest changes in history, normally, apart from natural environment. But humans haven't really been around for many cycles of the natural environment. And when you see a changing cultural philosophy, so we saw this we tend to see them with information revolutions because people have become more aware. They've become more clued in, and information isn't kept a kind of secret to just a small group. It's more widely shared. So we saw it with the Gutenberg press. We saw it, ironically, with what I think was the telephone. As benign as that sounds to us today, like such a simple thing. And now we've seen it. You know, I actually got this slightly wrong. I thought the information revolution was the internet, but I think it's probably AI as well. You know, I kind of underestimated where AI would play a role with information sharing. Mm-hmm. But the point being is that we're at this point, we're definitely seeing a philosophy change going on globally, not just kind of in the US or UK or Europe, but globally around the world. And, you know, those are really the moments when things really start to change. And the one that we're changing to, the philosophy that I think we're moving to, is what I term the age of awareness. So it's lovely that you use that word. I think kind of since the 1970s, so let's talk about inventions and innovation a little bit. 1970, we humanly, I keep saying we, I had nothing to do with it. We invented the semiconductor.
I was around then.
And the semiconductor, you know, we've labeled it the age of information technology. But actually, really, if we want to give it a name which makes sense, I suggest we use it's the age of measurement. We've just become insanely good at measuring stuff. Databases, big data, you know, we've even have to invent new terms to cope with it. And now what we're finding is we're starting to use that measurement ability to bring awareness to ourselves. And you see this ripple through every layer of society. So as you were saying, an awareness of the natural environment, an awareness of corporations, an awareness of how you invest money, awareness of the impact you have, the awareness that others have on you. This brings in wellness, mental health, everything. And I hope that that's kind of the tipping point, that it becomes less taboo. You know, there certainly is an awful lot of kind of reluctance, or previously there was, to talk about these kind of things, mental health. And we all have it. You know, we all, it's like saying, I don't have physical health. Of course I do. We all have mental health. We all have thoughts going through our head. And, you know, kind of where my work tries to take individuals and kind of corporate groups is just to build resilience, and build resilience specific, oh, I can't get my words out, build resilience specifically around uncertainty, because come back to that evolutionary trait. Uncertainty was something that you and I historically should have been afraid of. Mm-hmm. Uncertainty was stepping out of the cave and going, hold on a minute, something isn't right, something's changed. And that something back then was like, oh my word, it could want to eat me. Now, uncertainty, we still get the same physical reaction. It's still this highly evolved autonomic nervous system giving us signals, but the threats are very different. And we haven't quite got a head around that yet. And that's really where my work focuses. I try to always bring it back to biology rather than psychology, actually, because I think it helps people it's very easy to catch yourself with negative thoughts going, oh, I shouldn't have them. I need to get rid of them. I need to reframe them. I need to be positive. I think we have a lot to undo there. I think I keep throwing René Descartes under the bus at the moment. Poor René. But he was the one that said, you know, I think, therefore I am. And there's a subtle kind of thought process to that. And that is that your thoughts are important. Your thoughts actually define who you are. We are very precious about our thoughts. We think we're very clever. Actually, he'd been far better saying it the other way around. I am, therefore I think. You know, we are human and we have thoughts. The thoughts don't define us. And what we often find is those negative states. We've talked about kind of creativity and everything else, but negative and fear and anxiousness tend to happen at the higher stress states because it is your body physically reacting to stresses in the environment, triggers in the environment.
Yeah.
And what we've done so far is really just try and reframe. So this is the basis of things like cognitive behavioral therapy. Brilliant when you're not too stressed. When you're stressed out, you don't have access to cognition. Emotions win. And that's biology. You know, all of a sudden your brain chemistry changes, your autonomic nervous system shifts gear. And it's doing it because over tens of thousands of years, we've become very good at it. Where people aren't picking this up, you know, bring this back to social, is if you're in a really stressed state, I'm unlikely to remain calm. Because again, in that evolutionary period, if one tribesman spotted a lion, you didn't want for him to wait and go around with a little notepad and going, what are you going to do? You should run. You wanted to instantly pick up on it. Yeah. And I think this is something that we're missing, that we academically talk about these things in organizations and culture. You know, we kind of go, yes, I've got an open door policy, but I'm really stressed, so don't come and talk to me anyway. And until we actually embody those things, I think for me, where a lot of my work kind of rests is bringing awareness to stress states, bringing awareness to that physiology and neurology. Because when people actually get their head around that and they start to control that, they start to see, oh my word, my relationships change, my thought patterns change, my habits change. And we keep going in at the layer above. We try and like hack our habits, going, I've got a bad habit, I want to change it. Reduce the stress state and you'll tend to find that you instantly have this clarity of, no, I don't need a drink. Well, actually what I need is just to sit and relax, or I don't need to do this destructive behavior. I can actually sit with it and it'll dissipate.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, what comes to mind if this is a very simplistic summary of what you're saying, what comes to mind is that I think a lot of people, they default to the psychological aspect of all of it, you know, as you said, a layer up, because it is the easier road to go. It's trendy. You know, people always talking about mindset, change your mindset, change your thoughts, change your actions, all that. It can be very superficial in many ways. And I coach people on mindset every day, right? And those aspects. But I think you're absolutely right, is that, physiologically and biologically, there's certain things that have to change, or that behavior is not going to change, you know, like the, CBT or DBT or, different types of treatments that can help change that behavior. Those are more challenging to individuals, right? Those require more effort. It's kind of, speaks to where society is at. And, taking it back to what we were talking about change just a few minutes ago, is that everybody wants the easy path. They don't want to take the more difficult path, right? They want to take a pill to lose 30 pounds as opposed to, working out and eating right? Now, if they did change some of that behavior, would it, rewire new neural pathways in their brain when they create new habits of the eating or the exercise, and exercise is going to give you a whole host of other benefits? Like, would they be far better off doing that way? Yes. But that mentality of like, oh, just give me the pill and I'll take that. And, I'll do it the easy way. That is one of the unfortunate aspects of this information, revolution that we've talked about, is that now I can look up anything in 2 seconds and have an answer, and be my own doctor, if you will, or be my own psychologist or whatever, and say, oh, I'm just going to try this. And instead of saying, oh no, let me go find someone, or let me go do the work, or let me go, put in the time that it's going to take to be better. And so I think that, people like yourself doing that work, and I've had others on the podcast, like I had Dr. Rob Kelly a few episodes back, and he, he's talking about, rewiring those pathways and everything and what it takes. And he's a behavioral specialist and addictionologist and everything, and very widely known. And, the more I think, again, getting back to what I was talking about, I think some of the younger generations are more open to, they've grown up with everything so easy that it's almost become cool to say, oh, well, wait, let me do that course, or let me try that, or let me learn something new. Learning something new has become big in younger generations. Oh, I can learn anything. I can go on YouTube and I can learn how to play the guitar, in just a few months, and become a master at playing the guitar just by watching on YouTube. So that's where I think the information can help. It's also become a hindrance because everybody wants the easiest, fastest way. But I think that's where it can help. And so hopefully we get a balance. We get a little bit of both, both sides of that equation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think this is where kind of the changing tide in this is really around, the stuff coming out of academic research. I spent a lot of my time trawling through academic journals. But where we really see the changes are our understanding. Up until 20, 30 years ago, we didn't think, or we certainly didn't have the same view of things like you just touched on, neuroplasticity. We didn't have the same view on emotions, and still in the kind of the general public, the old school thinking is still out there. In that old school thinking, emotions are things you should banish unless it's positive. You shouldn't have a negative emotion, but you kind of just go, hold on a minute. Again, I'm going to take you back to that cave. We know emotions really, if they're left just to run their course, they should only last about 90 seconds. And every time I say that to somebody, they go, hold on a minute, I'm angry for more than 90 seconds. And I'm like, yeah, me too. But guess what I'm doing? If it goes beyond that, I'm turning my attention to it and I'm ruminating, or I'm, kind of literally giving it energy to think about it. And when we go kind of back to that era, the emotion is the language that our nervous system talks to our brain in. Our nervous system doesn't speak words. It doesn't actually tell stories. Our brain tells stories, but our nervous system just gives us emotions, and they're meant to be signals. And what I think is really sad is we've stopped listening to those signals. We've tried to reframe them, or banish them, or suppress them, or drug them away. And we're less aware. We're less aware of what's going on. Sometimes you'll get false flags from the nervous system, especially in our current modern world. There aren't lions. We see lions everywhere, but there aren't lions for most people. I don't have any in North Wales. Not here either. But they're meant to just be like, hold on a minute, stop, like, think about this. And that gives you kind of that time to kind of go, okay, well, is that a credible threat or isn't it? Do I need to do something about that? Or is it just something being thrown up by my nervous system linking to a memory, going, hold on a minute, last time we were in a similar situation to this, things went really bad. Mm-hmm. And the issue is, because we're not connected to ourselves like that, we are living at this kind of superficial plane. We're not able to go, kind of, oh, just a minute, it's my thinking. Let me just check in with that. No, it's not something I need to get stressed out, lose myself in, ruminate endlessly on. And this is kind of where the very simple framework, which I kind of came up with. So it's just called Pause, Pause, Move. Actually, it's the title of my second book, which is, I say I'm nearly finished writing, but who knows? And Pause, move really came from this idea that to make really good decisions in fast-paced environments, certainly complex environments, where uncertainty abounds and there's ambiguity and you don't know the outcomes, there's two pauses you need to do. And the first pause is very much that internal assessment, which we don't do. We never kind of stop to think, well, what's my thinking? How's it biasing my decisions? How's it biasing the information I'm taking in? Because you and I, we can't take in everything. No one can. You know, if we tried to take in all the data that was around us within about 5 seconds, we'd implode.
Yeah, no, we couldn't process it.
Yeah, we have to simplify. And so what's really interesting is as your state changes, as you move from a calm state to a stress state and all the stages in between, is actually the information you take in is different. It's not just how you process it. It's not just how you appraise it. Actually, what you focus on changes. And again, that's because negative information is far more important to a body or organism that believes it's under threat. Mm-hmm. And this is where mass media comes in massively, because they know this. They're hacking your brain every time they write a negative news headline. They're like, see if you can avoid clicking this one. And so the first pause is just assessing where you are. The second pause is then, once you're in a calm state, that opens up this whole new layer of being able to see things from other perspectives, to be curious, to be open-minded, all these things which are unavailable to you when you're stressed. And so the second pause follows on and it says, what don't I know? What happens if I shift my perspective? What if I was optimistic about this scenario? What if I was pessimistic? What if I was an alien from a different world coming down and just viewing this from a high level? And once you get those two pauses done, I mean, you know, at first it sounds laborious. I don't have time for that. I'm so stressed out. I've got so much on my plate. You're telling me to pause. But once you get used to it, you can do it in like 10 seconds. And then you get this incredible sense of clarity. Not always straight away, because the world is complex, but more often than not. And that's where so many people start the journey, is the move. They go, if I can just, I don't know, procrastinate less, or make sure my inbox is clear of emails, or my desk's tidy, then I'm going to do incredible work. And you're like, yeah, you might, but it's only if it somehow triggers something 2 steps before. Why don't we actually jump in at the first pause? Yeah,
that's very fascinating. And I appreciate you sharing that technique, and you know, others, we'll put in the show notes, you know, the links to your books, because that will be very beneficial for our audience. So thank you for sharing that. This is all so fascinating, and we could probably talk about it all day, but so in the interest in our show, just to you know, do justice to convincing you that you are a hero, what would you say is your current purpose? You know, I have an idea based on, you know, what you've been sharing, but how would you define, you know, just succinctly what your current purpose is?
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of work on this, and I've got it down to a few words. My purpose is to prepare people and organizations for tomorrow. That's as simple as it gets, and wrapped up in that tomorrow word is everything we've just talked about, is that uncertainty. Tomorrow is always uncertain. And when things start changing fast, it becomes even more so. To bring it back to our brain just one last time, you know, we don't actually react to things straight in front of us. We react to situations which we're anticipating. So we're actually anticipating tomorrow and physiologically reacting to that. So yeah, my mission is to prepare people. And to do that, I want more and more people to experience that state of joy and be able to elicit in themselves whenever they need it. Because if I can do that, then all these hurdles, obstacles, challenges up ahead, we solve. We take humanity to the next golden age. And I honestly believe that. And if we don't figure out our thinking, if we don't figure out this side, we'll get through, because we're human. We will. But we're just going to make it far tougher on ourselves, and we don't need to.
Yeah, and Chris, without realizing it, you hit on the E and the R for hero of you know, engaging others in your mission, and you know, by virtue of the work that you do, and then you know, rippling that message to spread positive change. Because just the, you know, sharing what you're sharing and the work that you're doing with more and more individuals, whether it's, corporation or a workshop or speaking or anything like that you do, that's going to have that ripple effect that continues on, and those people will impact others and they'll share what they've heard and so forth, or, read a book and everything. So those all, check the boxes, if you will, of you being a hero. And the last part is opening, your heart to the world, which I think you've done, and sharing everything today. So thank you for, being authentic, vulnerable, sharing, what you've learned and how you can impact others. I appreciate that.
Oh, no, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling me a hero.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome, Chris. Yeah, you wouldn't be on the show if you weren't. So tell our audience where can they connect with you? Where can they find out more about your work, connect with you? Where's the best place?
So I'm just going to direct them to my website, which is just theuncertaintyscientist.com. There, they can find blogs, workshops I'm running. There's actually a super cool little quiz people can do, which is around how much can you kind of handle uncertainty. It's only 10 questions. It's a bit of fun. It's not medically tested.
Yeah.
But it's a good starting point. And I'm always interested when people do it and what results they get. And if they want to reach out to me, then my contact details are on there. I'm on LinkedIn, so Chris Marshall. But yeah, probably theuncertaintyscientist.com is probably the best place to head. That literally has everything from, as I said, workshops, blogs, books, speaking engagements. So. Yeah,
very good. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. We'll make sure that everyone has access to that. So thank you for sharing that. So before we go, there's two final questions that I ask everyone. And the first is, and you may have talked about this with Jim Taylor earlier, but that would be a good example. But one thing we talk about on the show is a spark moment. And so I alluded to that ripple effect, and a spark moment, which we all have in life, and they can happen, any day, that's when our actions or the actions of another have a ripple effect that goes far beyond the initial act. So it could be something that someone, taught you or shared with you, like Jim Taylor that time, that time when you were skiing at the camp. Or it could be something that you've shared with something else. And then years later, they let you know, oh, this had that impact, this changed my life. So we all have them, right? So share a story of, a spark moment of a positive change that, where your life was impacted or you had an impact on someone else's life.
Yeah, so definitely that story I shared about Dr. Jim Taylor. That's certainly one, but I'm going to give you a different one just because, we tend to have more than one in our lives. We come across so many people and they inspire us to do things. It's actually a very similar age. It's a lady called Dr. Julia Jones. And I actually had the pleasure of her coming on my podcast a few weeks ago. And I hadn't spoken to her in 25 years. And it was like another, this was a British Olympic Association kind of fitness camp in a place called Crystal Palace in the UK. And Julie was brought in because she was a really good psychologist, a performance psychologist as well. But the session, as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old lad, however old I was, the session was something that I really didn't want to do. I found it a bit woo-woo. It was breathing. And I was like, come on, I know how to breathe. But what she shared and taught was just how, as an athlete, very similar to other high-stakes, fast-paced organizations and professions, they're highly dynamic situations. You're under an awful lot of strain and pressure. And what she taught was just kind of within 2 or 3 deep breaths, you can reconnect to yourself. And what I find more and more fascinating is as I look back, that certainly was a pivotal moment, because this is where not only had I had that massive insight from Jim kind of a couple of years earlier about there's a physical game and a mental game. Now I was being shown that the mental game could be influenced by physiology and the connection there. And I think that really has influenced my work, is that to understand how we think, we've got to be holistic. And by holistic, I mean whole body, not, kind of other kind of meanings of holistic. And so, yeah, that was definitely a spark moment, and lovely to be able to reconnect with her decades later.
Yeah, and that's fantastic because you were able to share that with her, right? I'm imagining you could share the impact that it had on your life, and how many others have you impacted because of what you learned from her, right? So that's a perfect example. Thank you very much for sharing that, Chris. I appreciate it. So before we go, the final question that I want to ask is, our goal at iSpark Change is to positively impact 1 billion people in the next 5 years of launch of our future social media platform and our upcoming, connection hub for individuals that are doing great positive things like yourself. So we know we can't do this alone, and we need the help of leaders like you to help show others the way, because many people feel, as I once did, that they're too small to make a difference and that they can't have an impact on the world. They can't be a hero. So I value your thoughts and opinions as a social impact hero. So I want you to peer into the future, peer into the iSpark Change crystal ball, and tell us, what can the world become if everyone believes that they can change and have an impact on the future?
My word, that is a big question. I wish I prepared for this one. I think what we get to is, I certainly hope, and I am speaking here slightly as a kind of that neurodivergent kind of group, an advocate for that, is that we embrace each of our talents, and that kind of sounds very vague, but what I'm talking about is collective intelligence. When humans work and cooperate together, if we can actually see the incredible abilities of each other, even if they're different, then we suddenly start to embrace these incredible networks of thoughts. Each and every one of us brings a slightly different perspective, even to the same event. And that's because we're pushing it through filters, beliefs, narratives, which we've viewed it through. And so, yeah, I mean, if the likes of you can help move this towards a world where we can embrace others, understand the importance of social, understand, again, bring this back to stress and my work around that, kind of teach people to control their stress. And all of a sudden we can be empathetic. We can be close. We can have meaningful relationships. We don't have to be proved right. And so that's where I hope the world is going. I think there's an awful lot of work to get there. But when people discover it, the beauty is that they pass it on and they cause that ripple effect that you're talking about, because they go, oh my word, my eyes have just been opened and I can't believe I haven't done this.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I've seen it. I've seen it, firsthand. I mean, I'll include myself in that category, but, I've seen it with many others. And so I know, it becomes one of those things that you want to tell, anyone you can, right? You want to just share it with 10 people, 20 people, 100 people. So yeah, what a beautiful world that would be. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for taking time to share your heart and your wisdom with our audience. You came in, you over-delivered as I expected you would. Your desire to be impactful is evident, and you're filled with, passion, intelligence, and you lead with a heart of service and humility, which tells me you're going to continue to have success in all facets of life. So this is only the beginning of your social impact. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, Impact Heroes, it's our stories that connect us all. We love hearing Chris's today. Chris Marshall, you're not only an inspiring and amazing human being, but you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you next time on the iSpark Change podcast. Thanks for listening today, and we will see you all next time on the iSpark Change podcast.
Do you want Rick to speak at your event? Here's what others have to say.
Did not know his story, and it was so inspirational, and his presence on stage, his authenticity was just incredible.
I absolutely loved his performance. It made me feel some type of way.
If you're looking for a speaker for your next event, hire Rick. I promise you this, you will not be disappointed.
Visit rickcornelis.com to book him today.
Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.